You don't write a novel in a day. It takes weeks, months, sometimes even years. And while you'll undoubtedly experience times of incredible productivity and focus, most of the time your writing is going to be spent chipping away at individual scenes of your story day by day. So what's the best way to approach writing a new scene? How do you stay motivated and excited about what you're writing, particularly when you might be sitting down to write a scene you're not terribly excited about? Well, here are a few questions I tend to ask myself when I'm writing out a new scene to keep me focused and productive, particularly if I'm writing something that I'm not really terribly excited about. The first question I ask myself when I'm writing a new scene is, how does this scene drive my story forward? Now, it sounds like a simple enough question, but there's an underlying decision that needs to be made for each scene that you write. Should this scene actually exist? Now, if you're revealing something vital to a plot or closing out a fight scene, a romantic dalliance or something like that, then the answer will most likely be yes, this scene needs to exist. But the question can be a little trickier to answer if you're narrating a passage of text which is simply trying to get character A from one place to another. Or if you're working through backstory, world building, or focusing on some specific detail of your larger story. You need to ask the question, does this scene actually advance the story in any way? If I remove it, does the book still make sense? If I write it, is it adding something essential to the larger story? Asking these questions will help you avoid writing filler passages and should make your writing sharper and more focused as you move through the draft and editing phases of your book. True, you might not be able to answer this question early on in the writing process, but this act of constantly interrogating why you're actually writing a scene and whether it needs to be there will dramatically enhance your storytelling. Another great approach for writing a new scene is to focus on character enhancement. Ask yourself, what does this scene reveal about my main characters? What secrets are uncovered? What truths are revealed? Every new scene is an opportunity to develop your characters, to show greater depth and complexity, and to draw readers into the story. This might be a significant revelation, but more often than not, individual scenes offer opportunities to reveal small details about your character's state of mind, their struggles, fears, doubts, frustrations, and so on. There's no need to be heavy-handed with this. Subtlety is the key. Sure, readers might miss the odd hint here and there, but over the course of the story, incremental revelations will add up and readers will find themselves drawn deeper and deeper into the story. By focusing on developing and deepening your characters in each new scene, you're honing in on what's most important about the story. You might have an amazing premise, some exquisite world building, but what hooks readers and keeps them coming back is your characters. Thirdly, when writing a new scene, I try to be mindful of how readers are going to feel while they're reading that scene. I ask myself, how excited will readers be to read this scene? How can I surprise readers or deepen their investment in the story? As writers, sometimes we focus too much on story and world building, and we forget that there are readers at the end of the process. At each stage throughout the book, we want our readers to feel a certain way, to ask certain questions, and be guessing at what's coming up ahead. But this isn't something that happens by accident. Part of the art of editing and crafting a great story is in tailoring your book to the reader experience, using writing techniques to engender fear, surprise, sorrow, curiosity, and all the other emotions that hook readers and keep their eyes glued to the page. Writing a scene while focusing on the reader experience will cause us to do a few important things. First, it will prompt us to tweak our language and sentence structure in a way that brings readers along for the journey. We'll avoid telling and focus more on showing. We won't use so many patter words or filler phrases, and we'll constantly be evaluating our language to ensure that the intended meaning is getting across to our readers. Secondly, we'll be less likely to favor complexity over simplicity. Just because the sentence sounds delicious to our ears as a writer, that doesn't mean it's the most effective way of communicating our message to readers. Keeping the reader in mind will help us avoid unnecessary complexity and allow us to keep it simple. And thirdly, we'll be forced to ask, would a reader really be interested in this? And that question will help us inject our writing with more vitality and necessity. Instead of forcing information on our readers, we'll be more inclined to consider what information the reader needs out of each scene. If there's something important we need to get across, viewing the scene from the reader's perspective will help us shape that information in a way which is most impactful and enjoyable to readers. Now, we should note here that keeping the reader in mind is a fantastic way to sharpen your writing, but it can also prove quite distracting and demotivating, particularly early on in your writing journey. If you're struggling just to get your first book written, you may not want to agonize over the reader experience in each and every scene. But for more experienced writers, keeping the reader in mind at every step of the writing process will improve your writing and help streamline the writing process. So that's it. Some of the questions I ask myself when I'm sitting down to write a new scene. They're particularly useful with scenes that I'm not looking forward to writing and areas of the story where I've just written come back later in the initial draft. Asking how a scene advances the story, focusing on enhancing character, and viewing the scene from the reader's perspective are three great ways to stay focused and productive as a writer. But what about you? What tips and tricks do you use to stay focused and productive when writing individual scenes of a larger story? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, why not subscribe to the channel? It's awesome!